Hey guys, today we're going to show you a few examples of how we analyze pitching mechanics for our remote clients. This is a small glimpse into how we get our guys ready and where they need to be by game time. We utilize two methods to analyze pitching mechanics for our remote clients, along with our table assessment and our strength and power testing. We use Mocap and video analysis, 4-camera video analysis. We're looking at over 60 metrics of pitching mechanics, and if we do have the ability to do a Mocap, if you're coming in and you're a remote client and you're coming in-house to do your assessment, we can look at kinematic sequencing, shoulder and elbow torque, and various angular velocities. We'll get into that in a bit, but for the most part, we're going to go over how we analyze video for our remote clients who are training away from the facility. First, let me say a few things about Mocap. First of all, if you can't analyze pitching mechanics with video alone, you're in the wrong business. We primarily use video to look at the overall throw. We look at athleticism, we look at timing issues, and other variables in the mechanics. However, we do feel that with Mocap, you can accomplish what I consider like a perfect storm between looking at angular velocities, torques, more accurate foot plant timing. A key thing, milliseconds can change positions of where the arm or where the hips are or where the trunk is, and Mocap gives us a very accurate position point for foot plant. So it gives us angular velocities, which correlate highly to velocity, throwing velocity. And it provides us with a time-based kinematic sequence that lets us know how the athlete is transferring force up the kinetic chain, things basically that we can't see with our eyes. Like I said before, if you can't come in and get a Mocap, no biggie, but if you can, that's the perfect storm. Here's a glimpse into our pitching analysis with over 60 bullet points, as I mentioned before. We analyze a delivery from start, from the balance position, all the way through to release in order. We feel like it gives us a good rhythm when we're doing that. These disconnects are weighted. So we may see a late arm, but we may also see lack of pelvic glute engagement. In this case, we would go back and go upstream and fix the lower half, which could be causing the arm action, or maybe lengthen up the stride, or maybe it is just the arm action. This gives us, weighting these mechanics gives us the opportunity to hit the bullet points that may actually fix 2 or 3 things and not overwhelm the athlete by giving him a lot of disconnects to work on, sort of like chasing 5 rabbits and they all get away. We first break mechanics down through different parts of the delivery. We classify them as leg lift, stride, which includes the beginning of the rotation, foot plant and rotation, and release. We eventually classify them in buckets within these movements by arm, trunk, and lower half. And these can be easily accessed by the athlete's remote coach or the athletes themselves. This makes it much easier for the athlete to grasp not only where the site of the issue is, but the source of the issue as well. Today we're going to look at 10 or so disconnects of the over 60 we look at in our remote analysis. These are what we consider to be some of the bigger players we come across when analyzing video. Like I said previously, there are no absolutes. For example, after a 1 to 2 week adjustment, sometimes things simply aren't moving in the right direction. We then need to look elsewhere to effectively flush out what could be causing the problem. And this is where weekly contact with a performance coach is key. Okay guys, first we're going to look at arm-shoulder action. Number 20 on the weighted list, shoulder external rotation at foot plant. This can be generally linked to tight internal rotators, particularly the lat and the pec minor. It gets displayed as at foot plant. We're looking for that arm to be on our Mocap. We look for 40 to 75 degrees. Okay, we don't want a low arm at foot plant. It really puts the shoulder in a provocative position to accept force on. We also don't want it early and way up here, okay, as well. So we're looking for that 40 to 75 degrees to be able to accept force. And a lot of times that's poor timing of the lower half with the scap load coming around, getting the arm up. So this will be one of those situations where we'll look upstream and maybe find that we've got a short stride that we can lengthen up and give the arm more time, or maybe we're not getting into our glute and we're not creating really good timing with our lower half to allow us to delay that rotation and get the arm up as well. Okay, here we have two examples. On the left, we have a laid arm. On the right, we have a arm that's getting into a good position. First, we're going to look at the laid arm over here on the left from our Mocap. This athlete, as he comes down the mound and he hits foot plant, you can see the arm right here at weight-bearing foot plant is at about 5 degrees. Flat being 0, straight up being 90. We're looking for about 40 to 75 degrees to put that arm in a really nice position to accept force from this front leg. This is a very provocative position for him to be accepting force from this front leg in such internal rotation. And like I said before, this could become from a number of things. One, it could be coming from tight internal rotators of the pec minor and the lat and the subscap. It could also be a timing issue with the lower half. Okay, maybe he's not striding far enough, not giving the arm enough time. We just lengthen that stride a little bit, puts more force into the ground, as well as getting the arm up. Like I said, you have to play with things, but first things first, we know that we've got a laid arm. Over here on the right, we can see that his Bumgardner comes down the mound and he reaches weight-bearing foot plant, like right about there. We can see that he's at about 75 degrees, that 40 to 75 that we're looking for. This gives him a really, really good position for this shoulder to accept this force. And also, it allows him to get in a really good position to adequately create that whip and lay back and get good layback and max external rotation from the arm being in a good position. Number 21 is elbow flexion at foot plant. This is the amount of degrees of flexion that we get at foot plant. Mocap tells us that we're looking for 85 to 100. The degrees get higher as we go in, FYI, lower as we go out. A low degree of elbow flexion we call forearm flyout. One more thing that puts the arm in a very provocative position, getting too much humeral glide anteriorly to accept force, while a high degree can shorten the lever arm and negatively affect that flip back into layback, and negatively affect how much layback we actually get. It's not always an arm issue. A lot of times it's a lower half issue. This is a big issue we see with younger guys who pull off really quick, causing that arm to kick back into fly out, putting the arm in a bad position, also making it hard, command, and end up getting a push with the ball. Different size guys have different degrees we look at. Between that 85 to 100, we have guys, anthropometrics matter. Longer guys, shorter guys fall in different areas of that range. We need to take that into consideration as well. Okay, much like shoulder ER, foot plant, we're going to look at elbow flexion, and much like the prior, this can be caused by lower half timing issues as well. We're first going to take, whether we're above or below the 90 to 110 degrees that we're looking for. Both can cause unnecessary stress on the UCL. We're going to look at Otani, who does a really great job of getting that elbow at foot plant into a good position. We take him to weight-bearing foot plant right here, and we can see that arm is around 92 degrees, 90 degrees being straight up, and the amount of flexion, the number gets greater as we get in. So this would be 80 degrees, this would be 100 degrees. We're looking for anywhere between 90 and 110, and you can see he's right in that area, which is great. For less than 90 to 85 to 90, if the arm was out here, that's going to be called what we call forearm flyout. This is a laid arm. It also causes pain in the anterior shoulder because it's once again a very provocative position to put that arm in. Anything greater than 110, where that fist starts to get close, that hand starts to get close to the ear, that can compromise the lever arm and cause the arm to not get into a great position to get good layback. We don't see this a lot. We see more forearm flyout, but for the most part, you'll see your guys generally getting between 90 to 110. But if it's greater, that can compromise layback. If it's less, that can cause anterior shoulder pain in the later arm. Both can be issues of, a lot of times, younger guys will pull this glove side early, and it can whip that upper half around and cause that arm to be a little bit late because the torso is coming around early. And we can stop that by getting better glove side integrity, or, lengthening that stride to give the arm more time to get up. Here we see a great stride, we see a great closed upper half, and the arm at about 92 degrees, really done well. So we're looking for greater than 110 or less than 90, 85 degrees. They would be red flags for us to address this issue. Number 23 is max external rotation, max shoulder external rotation at foot plant. This is not to be confused with shoulder external rotation at foot plant. This is max shoulder external rotation at foot plant, or basically layback. A little different, but very similar. This allows the athlete to carry external rotation longer through the acceleration phase, is generally a product of not being able to get back and retract and get into a good scap load, usually due to, once again, tight internal rotators like the pec minor and the lat. Being able to get into max external rotation, you can have good max external rotation, but if you have it early or late, you're going to end up pushing the ball or put stress on the anterior shoulder. We're looking for that max external rotation to be somewhere around very close to foot plant. And it allows the athlete to carry force for a longer period of time in the acceleration phase. So, like I said, it's usually a result of a poor scap load. We will go back and look at scap load. This is how our chain of events go in series, how we look at things, how we figure out how something down the lane might be caused by something that happened earlier on. And our Mocap is 160 to 180 degrees should the athlete be in-house doing a Mocap. Okay, we've got one more arm issue. Disconnect, that's max shoulder ER at foot plant. This is basically the maximum amount your shoulder lays back. This is another disconnect that can cause unwanted stress on this UCL. And it's usually a result, once again, as a lot of arm issues are, the result of soft tissue restrictions of the shoulder's internal rotators. That would be this pec minor, this subscap, and this lat, which attaches from the thoracolumbar fascia all the way up and into the inside of the humerus, okay? Excess tone in this lat will make it really hard to not only get into good layback, but actually to spring it forward into the acceleration phase as well. Getting into good layback here is Grenke's showing us about 175. We generally look for about 160 to anywhere to 180, 185. We don't want 200, 205. That's going to create instability in the shoulder, but somewhere between 160 to 180 we find is a really good number. This allows us to carry external rotation through the entire acceleration phase all the way into ball release. One important thing to remember is having a good amount of max external rotation is great, but we really want to make sure it's happening at or slightly after foot strike. We don't want to create this max external rotation early because we're going to end up getting a push with the ball. We want to wait for the arm to get thrown into layback from the force that's applied by decelerating this front leg. Okay, so we're looking for 160 to 180. Here Grenke's showing us 175. Helps us carry force for a longer period of time through the acceleration phase. Helps protect the UCL. A lot of important things that, Grenke's displaying this really well. All right, guys, let's take a look at trunk movement. Number 24, trunk rotation at foot plant. This is whether we're seeing a lot of guys talk about opening up your front side early, causing that early rotation of the upper body. We're looking on our Mocap, we look at anywhere from 0 to 10 degrees. That would be 0 is pointing straight here. This is the plate. We're looking anywhere from 0 to minus 10 degrees to create that nice torque on the spine. It puts the spine in a more compromised position to accept ground reaction force if we're coming around early. That creates excess flexion in the spine. By keeping the torso back while the hips are moving forward, it allows us some good tension and torque on that spine. That torque creates a much more stable spine to land and accept force and eventually close the gap on with hip and shoulder separation. And like I said before, our Mocap, the torso should be between 0 and 10 degrees. A lot of kids will pull this open, once again, by flying open with a glove side. That'll bring the upper side around. It could be core strength. It could be a poor scap load, could be one of a number of things, but we analyze the issue and then we go back and we see what shakes free. Okay, let's get on to some trunk issues, guys. First thing we're going to look at is trunk rotation at foot plant. This can really severely compromise the ability to utilize the stretch shortening cycle during recall. It also puts the spine and the entire upper body into a compromised position to accept ground reaction forces when we're blocking with that lead leg. Okay, so these issues can be caused by early hip rotation, setting the entire delivery off early, poor scap load, or maybe pulling with that glove side early. We're going to take a look at DeGrom doing a great job at showing us exactly how it's done. As he comes down, we can see right here that he's keeping his lower half closed till later. As he turns, it syncs up with that scap load, okay? That's creating that nice big stretch in his pecs right here. Okay, good scap load, opening up these hips so that by the time we do get to foot plant, he's got a nice coil to uncoil with and transfer force from that leg into layback and through the acceleration phase. It's really important to remember that he's keeping this lower half closed, because if he came around too early, okay, he would start the whole delivery off early, okay? He's keeping a nice closed glove side. A lot of young guys will see them pull that glove side early and bring that trunk around early, and he's syncing up that scap load. As the hips come around, the arm goes back, creating that hip and shoulder separation. So when he lands, he's got that 0 to minus 10 degrees that we're looking for. He's got a nice torqued spine to create a nice stable upper body to land from, to accept this ground reaction force and to let it go into his delivery. Number 28, rotation perpendicular to spine. Max acceleration and efficient energy transfer best happens on a vertical axis. If I could use an example of a propeller, we have a propeller on a stem. When the propeller is being your shoulders and the stem being your spine, when they are perpendicular, you get a really good spin axis. As that propeller gets a little off, it starts to wobble. This is an example of what we look for when we throw. When we throw, we want our shoulders to be perpendicular to the spine. This also helps set up the arm slot. So for sidearm guys, we have it straight, we have an arm here, okay, creating that 90 degrees as well, okay? Guys that are back are over the top. Guys that are low, submarine guys, we're always looking for that perpendicular axis. So no matter where it is, it will help us set up that arm slot and create efficient energy transfer up the chain. You can see here with DeGrom, as he throws, he's keeping his plane of rotation with that spine. Okay, so the next disconnect is, are the shoulders rotating perpendicular to the spine from foot plant through to release? Max acceleration and efficient energy transfer happen on a vertical axis. So in order for that to be effective, rotation should happen 90 degrees perpendicular to the spine. This will also help set up the arm slot. This would be a higher arm slot for more upright pitchers and a lower arm slot for flexion guys such as submarine guys or sidearm guys. We want to watch DeGrom right now as he displays a really good example of keeping this perpendicular. As we get to foot plant, we can see that he's got his shoulders pretty perpendicular, that T, with his spine. This is key for creating max acceleration and getting it really great, getting great max external rotation and getting great rotation, like I described with that pinwheel in the prior slide. As he comes down from foot plant, he's going to bring his body forward into flexion, and he's going to maintain this 90-degree perpendicular distance between his shoulder and his spine, even though he's leaning forward. All the way through into release, we can still see that he's got this, his shoulders and his spine are perpendicular. This is giving him max acceleration, giving him a great platform to spin from. So here we have, there's that T, there's that T, there's that T, like I said, all the way through to release. That's shoulders rotate perpendicular to spine. Number 47, trunk forward tilt at release. This helps us create more leverage on the ball. This is exemplified by an athlete getting out in front over that front leg at release. It gives us a bigger leverage point on the ball, helps us stay on that ball longer. That can help us get better spin on the ball, whether it's back, whether it's down for more vertical break. And it also gives the pitcher an advantage and the batter a disadvantage by giving the pitcher more perceived velocity. The closer he can get to that batter before he releases the ball, the less time the batter has to actually react to that pitch. Okay? It also helps the lat muscles absorb much of the decelerating forces of the arm, assuming that anterior pelvic tilt is good and thoracic extension is good. When we get out front, this will help the lat absorb a lot of this deceleration of the arm instead of the arm just slamming shut. Okay, number 6, trunk forward tilt at release. This is an interesting one because it correlates very highly to velocity, throwing velo, and it's not easy to do. It looks a lot easier than it really is, and it's something that we see a lot of guys struggle with. Of course, we're not really talking about submarine guys or sidearm guys. This is more for the three-quarter and over the top guys. But the ability to get into this front leg and get this forward, as you can see, Garrett Cole comes down at release, okay? He's got a really nice flat back, okay? He's out over that front leg. You have to have a really strong anterior core for this and a really strong front leg to help support this trunk forward tilt. But what this is doing is, this is allowing him to stay on the ball longer. Okay, what that's going to do is at release, that's going to allow him to come down on that ball harder, giving him better backspin, giving him a better vertical break because he can come down on that ball, and also better perceived velocity, okay, because the batter isn't seeing that ball till the last minute, and milliseconds count in something as fast as throwing and hitting. So, you know, the other thing is, if anterior pelvic tilt and lumbar stability and thoracic extension are all good, this increased forward trunk flexion helps ensure that the lat muscles are absorbing much of the braking forces of this throw. So the lat is coming into play and helping absorb a lot of this without this arm having to slam shut. So couple things, really perceived velocity, good leverage, late ball speed, good leverage on the ball, good spin, and really helps the braking forces and preventing the arm from slamming shut at release. Okay, guys, finally, let's look at the lower half. Biggest prime movers we have. Number 3, pelvic glute engagement and timing. You can see it's number 3. It happens early on in the delivery, and it's also something that is one of our go-tos when we see issues further downstream. Many times we can find that this is actually one of the major culprits for things that happen at the arm and at the trunk. It's key for maintaining posture in the foot plant and avoiding that push, or what we call vaulting, off the rubber. So if we see vaulting in our video analysis, we're immediately going to go back and look to see if the glute is engaged 9.9 times out of 10, it's not engaged, which is why they're vaulting. Vaulting creates you have to share the energy both vertically and linear. So it's a leak, somewhat of a leak for creating horizontal linear energy flow to the plate. So if we can get this glute engaged, sitting in and hinging into that glute, we can create that horizontal force going down towards the plate, create more better and later hip and shoulder separation, better and later hip rotation, and let things happen further down the mound, such as we do with drifting as well, to make sure that we're waiting till the last minute for go time. When that foot hits the ground, everything rolls. So keeping the glute engaged allows us to create later arm speed, later rotation, everything happening further down in the delivery. Okay, pelvic glute engagement timing, lower half. This is a big one. You can see it's number 3. It's early on in our analysis, and it is the perpetrator of a lot of different disconnects that happen later downstream. It's something that we always go back to and find that is a cause of a lot of arm action issues as well. It helps better load the back glute and create tension to be released further down. We're going to look at Stroman as he comes in. Okay, you can see he's winding into that back leg, loading it, keeping that knee slightly bent on the bottom. It should not be straight. And then he's going to come down and he's going to create lateral force down the mound. Okay, delaying that energy transfer until he starts rotating that back knee in and starting that rotation down and into the ground. A lot of things we look for here is we don't want the knee to come over this back toe. That means he's loading quad dominant. He's not getting into his glute. So as you can see, as he comes down the mound, that knee, he sits back with his butt and he's going down, creating that force, keeping a nice stable back foot into the ground. And as he brings that knee down, he creates later rotation with his hips till we reach foot plant. This is defined by proper weight distribution on that back foot, slightly hinging at the hips, key for maintaining that posture in the foot plant and avoiding a push or vaulting off the rubber. A lot of times we'll see those guys leaning forward and getting quad dominant, bringing their delivery this way, and he's staying all in the back leg, using his powerful posterior chain, rotating in, creating lateral force, and getting as much of that lower half into his delivery as possible. Number 5, weight shift or drifting. This is the shifting of the center of mass away from the rubber before we actually start to sink into our load. We want that sinking down into the back leg drive. We want that to happen after the torso begins and the center of mass begins to drift. If not, we're trying to move a static object. Some guys can actually get away with this, some more elite, really powerful and strong guys. But for the most part, I liken it to if someone was walking and they pushed you from behind while you were walking and was pushing something that was already moving, you would kind of go flying, okay? If you're standing there and someone pushes you, you're going to kind of just bob forward. So by being able to push with your back leg, when we initiate rotation and be able to push something that's already drifting forward, we can actually create a more forceful and explosive rotation when it is time to go. Okay? That poor linear momentum, by sitting it statically and trying to drive, that poor linear momentum can transfer into a weak ground reaction forces in the front leg, which will give us weak ground reaction forces coming back and weak forces being transferred up the chain. So being able to drift, push and turn and really get everything happening later, especially for our guys who create their peak velocities on our Mocap early, this is great. Generally we find them, they're kind of like a sit and go guy, you know what I mean? So this is weight shift and drip, and we're going to take a look at it right now. Okay, continue on with the lower half. Efficient weight shift prior to loading. So the purpose of a weight shift is to initiate the movement of the center of mass down the mound. This helps create linear force direction once the drive phase begins. If not, the pitcher has to play catch up throughout the rest of the delivery and can create command issues, as well as killing that momentum in the foot plant and not getting those ground reaction forces. So as you can see, DeGrom, as he comes up, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at his center of mass, okay? Basically his core, his pelvis and his core. And we want to see this start to move before he gets into this, loading this lower leg, okay? And there he goes. It's moving, it's moving, it's moving, it's moving. Now he's starting to drop into this lower leg, okay? And what that's doing is that's helping him to actually, when he does decide to push off this lower leg, he's already pushing a moving target, okay? So it helps him create a more efficient push going down the mound, hit that front leg with more force, okay? It also helps delay rotation because as he's kind of like drifting down the mound here, he's able to keep that lower half closed still and his upper half closed because he doesn't have to apply any force yet into the back leg to start creating rotation, okay? So he can create his rotation later down the mound. That's really great for our early guys who tend to get everything going a bit early, and as a result get their hip and shoulder separation early, and everything starts to unwind early. So when we're looking for this drift, once again, we're looking for this center of mass to move prior to this glute and lower leg loading, accepting force, delays rotation, gets everything going a bit later, ensures that we're creating linear movement during the drive phase. Next up, early hip rotation timing. Helps put that lead leg in the most optimal position to block and decelerate. Also helps us create an anterior pelvic tilt to help set up the angle the spine will eventually flex to. As we land and we rotate our hips down into landing, we'll create an anterior pelvic tilt towards the batter, and that will actually give us the angle in which our spine will flex to and get us good forward trunk flexion going into release. It also helps us delay. We want to avoid early hip rotation timing, so it helps us delay the rotation of the hips and create better hip-shoulder separation. Not only better, but the timing of that hip and shoulder separation. It'll happen later. A lot of times guys rotate those hips early. They create a lot of hip and shoulder separation, but they create it early. We want to actually take our time, get down that mound, create later hip rotation, and make that hip and shoulder separation max out around foot plant, or even maybe just a little after. We could see that by staying in the heel just before foot plant. Guys that open up get off their heel early, that probably means they're opening up their hips a little too early. And for our Mocap, we're looking for 25 to 50 degrees at foot plant. Something we can also see with video, as we'll show you right now. Okay, let's take a look at early hip rotation timing. Precise timing of hip rotation will help put the lead leg into the most optimal position to block and decelerate. It also helps to create an anterior pelvic tilt, which will set up that angle that the spine will eventually flex to. Also helps create optimal hip-shoulder separation and maximizes the speed of trunk rotation. It's a big player. So what we're looking for here in our Mocap, we look for 25 to 50 degrees. You can see as Bumgardner comes down at foot plant, we're looking for 25 to 50 degrees of rotation of this trunk. We'll wait till that foot gets to weight bearing, which is about right there. Okay, and you can see we've got a good 40 to 45 degrees right here. That's perfect. That's right in that 25 to 50 we look for. You know, give or take a little bit, especially with these elite guys. You know, they can get away with a lot more. But we found that, you know, keeping that 25 to 50 degrees, which is really hard to see on video. This is one example of where we can get actual dead-on foot plant, and where this angle of pelvic rotation will change drastically based off when the foot is actually hitting the ground, okay? But regardless, we can get a ballpark figure and see what's happening. And we can see as he comes around and he lands, he gets that pelvis into a really good position at about 40 to 45 degrees. And once again, you can see he's got that 0 to 110 that we're looking for here, creating that X factor stretch that will help him unwind into rotation. If these hips were a little too far open this way, facing the batter, that would put this leg in a compromised position to block from. If he was more closed off, facing us, that would have him slam into IR a little bit early, forcing an early release point from the arm and maybe possibly cutting the ball as well. Number 18, lead leg foot position at foot plant. This is some things that a lot of guys don't look at. We take it very seriously. I find it to be a big game changer for a lot of guys. Once again, there are many elite athletes, Kershaw, Chris Sale, guys that open up and keep that front foot opened up, as we could say here. Kudos, by the way, to my partner, Bahram Shirazi, for these beautiful yellow arrows that we see here. But this will give us, keeping that foot a little closed, will give us a more stable base of support to transfer force during lead leg blocking. Right here. It'll also give us a much more stable base of support to throw against. We're looking to apply that force in a posterior direction. We don't want to push back, but that force will come back into a posterior direction and kick the arm into layback. But we can create that force, that stability much better when we have a closed foot, as you can see here, as opposed to this open foot. Once again, there are no absolutes. There are elite athletes who do this and do it well. Are we going to change what they do? No, we are not. But for the most part, if we see an athlete who's not quite where they want to be, and we see this, we've found this to be a game changer. Okay, lead leg foot position at foot plant. This helps create a more stable base of support at landing to better rotate on as well as throw against. We can see it in this Mocap right here. As the athlete comes down, this red line is highlighting where his foot is landing. Okay, that's a little bit externally rotated. Okay, this is going to put a lot of tension, as you can see in that knee joint. Okay, as he lands, that knee takes the brunt of it right there in that knee joint. Okay, that is due to a really unstable base of support that he's got going on right at this foot. If this foot was straighter or even a little bit more internally rotated, we look for about 0 to 20 degrees internally rotated in our Mocap. But this is something you can easily see with video, okay? That it will give him a more stable base to throw against. It will support that front leg. It will not get this kind of lateral positioning happening, which will be our last disconnect we'll look at after this. And it will give him a better position to throw against. It will create more force up the chain by helping him decelerate better. A more closed foot is just a more optimal way to stop than opening up. And like I've said many times, there are athletes, Kershaw, I know, Chris Sale, they land opened up like this. They do great with it. Are we going to tell those guys to change what they're doing? Absolutely not. But for our guys that are trying to get to the next level and aren't quite where they want to be, that's something we would want to look at. Number 19, lead leg stability or spinning off. What that is it goes hand in hand kind of with the front foot we were talking about. Many times when a guy has his foot opened up too much to either straight ahead or to the outside, a lot of times we can see that knee laterally shift to the outside, creating him to spin off, command issues, and also, once again, a poor transfer of force up the kinetic chain, up the leg, through the core, and into the arm. So what we're looking for is that knee at foot plant. Does it move laterally, or does he give us a nice deceleration pattern where he's nice and tight, keeping a good stable base of support that he can transfer force up through? And finally, lead leg stability from foot plant to release. A stable front knee or leg will better decelerate the athlete's linear momentum towards the target. This will help maximize transfer of force up that chain. What we're looking for is any excess movement at foot plant in that knee going laterally. When we land, we can see Stroman does a great job of landing, and it actually goes the other way. That's that clawback mechanism, his adductor digging into the ground, okay? As he lands, you can see right here, what will we be looking for is we would be looking for any lateral movement this way of the knee. This would signify that he's actually just rotating with his hips and kind of spinning off. He's not really getting down into the ground and creating a good stable base. If an athlete is rotating their hips down as well as laterally across, there should be adequate enough force into the ground if their leg is strong enough to prevent that spin off from happening. And you can see he gets great post up right there. And that, this will usually signify, if we have this lateral movement, that the athlete is not rotating his pelvis down. Like you can see his pelvis going down and into the ground right there. He rotates in, he starts to rotate around and down into the ground, okay? Creating this nice tension in his leg. He's strong enough to support it and allow him to continue to post up and transfer that energy up the chain. Lead leg stability, foot plant to release. We're really excited about launching this remote training program. If you are fortunate enough to be able to get in-house and get an assessment with us and utilize the Mocap, great. If you're not, no big deal. We'll do your assessment remotely. We'll train you remotely. We're going to use the same principles that we use every day to train all of our elite athletes. We're going to utilize our power testing. We're going to use our strength training. We're going to utilize our pitching mechanic video. We've waited till it's really ready, and we really feel like it's ready. Stay tuned. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. If you're interested in our training material on pitching, hitting, or strength training, you can reach us at rocklandpeakperformance.com or on Twitter and Instagram at RPP_baseball. You can also call our front desk at 201-308-3363 or email us at rpp@rocklandpeakperformance.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel on the way out.